And I think electric vehicles are a big piece of that puzzle to reduce your emissions. I feel like that's our role, us as a kind of Lex Autolease, but also us as an industry. Welcome to the Take Charge of Change podcast series, where LEXperts will tell you everything you need to know about making your fleet fit for the future. In this episode, we'll be discussing sustainability.
I think to just talk about electrification in general is difficult. So I think we have some easy areas where there are fewer barriers. So company car drivers who can charge at home, quite simple. There's lots of tax incentives, and being able to charge at home takes a lot of range anxiety away. I think if you can't charge at home, then there's a little bit more work that needs to be done there to ensure that the person can charge the vehicle adequately. But I think probably when you're looking at key barriers, and the ones that we're really being asked to look at the most, it's the larger commercial vehicles that have various issues. And some of that is suitable vehicles available. And it's the old issue of range versus payload. So you can have a longer range vehicle by putting bigger batteries in, but bigger batteries cost more money and take away payload of the vehicle.
So we're really trying to educate customers as much as we can of all levels about how actually electric vehicles are more cost effective for them in the main than the traditional petrol and diesel, even if their monthly rental that they see going out of their account every month is higher than what a traditional diesel would be.
Having people who have done it before or understand these various elements helps, because when you're building the business case for change, you're not keep coming up against new issues you hadn't thought of. So we'll look at the whole fleet and look at either saving money holistically or going to electric but without a price increase. But you might have to offset the cars against the vans, and they might be operated by different parts of the business. So it's linking it together and making sure that all these things are understood from the outset.
It means that the entirety of the business has got to have a joined up approach. And I think that is where we can support in terms of helping engage dialogue at the right level within the organisation and bringing all of the stakeholders together so that you don't just get the fleet manager who's banging the drum by themselves. You need procurement, you need finance, you need the sustainability leads, you need the operations guys as well. So everybody has got to come together and agree the approach for the business as a whole.
And that's why, when we look at transitioning fleets, we don't turn around and say, right, everybody's got to move to electric now. It's all about having a phased transition where you deal with the easier scenarios first, and you don't forget about the other things. An area where we've had no vehicles available in the market is off-road capable 4x4 pickup trucks. So you don't stop your transition because you've got a group of vehicles that can't go electric now. You move what you can now, but you have a plan for where you're going to introduce those. And there might be clear targets for those plans. So for the 4x4s, it's obviously when there's a product available. If you look at people's mileage and their daily routines, it might be, and this was a case for me, I needed a vehicle that could do 200 miles of motorway driving and put about 150 miles charging a vehicle in about a 20-minute stop. Now my car way exceeds that. It does 330 miles and I can get 200 miles in 15 minutes. But I'd worked out what I needed so that I was waiting for that vehicle to come on the market so that it wouldn't impact me heavily in my daily role. So it's just, if the technology isn't quite right for you now, don't dismiss, but have that strategy plan ahead of you.
And it's not just the technology, I guess, it's the infrastructure as well. So as the vehicle ranges get better, as the charging speeds get quicker, you're also seeing kind of local councils rolling out better charging infrastructure in kind of suburbs, for example. So even those people who can't charge at home right now, that doesn't mean in a period of time they won't be able to. There won't be on-street chargers, for example, for them. Their local supermarket might have a charger that works, but that kind of stuff's popping up all the time as well.
And, we've got over 100,000 public connectors now in the UK, which is a high number. We can always do with more. and we've got targets to have more. And we've seen the growth in rapid chargers at motorway services, etc., increase. I think it's 45% in the last 12 months. So when you look at the growth of the network, there's certainly stuff being done. Now I feel we're in phase 2, where it's okay, so we need larger bays. And we need larger bays for commercial vehicles. We need larger bays for disabled people, so that they can access the chargers easily and safely. And that is happening now. When you actually look at commercial vehicles being driven, especially in urban environments, you know, if you've got equipment in the back, vibrations from the engine can make it rattle. Your first, second gear all the time, on the clutch all the time. The overwhelming feedback from van drivers when they go over to electric is that they don't want to give the electric vehicle back. You know, once they've gone over to electric, they basically, you know, the benefits, especially in urban driving, or just one pedal driving, you know, using the regenerative braking and hardly using the brake.
My husband works for one of our largest customers, and he's based at Manchester Airport. So he drives an electric van. He's got a VW electric van. He absolutely, and it's shared by all of the colleagues within that site who work for this company, and it's the second electric van that they've had on site. And for a while they had a diesel vehicle and they had the electric. Nobody wanted to drive the diesel one. They all wanted the electric one. They absolutely love them. We
had a project down in Portsmouth, as you know, where they were looking at trialling one electric vehicle, and we put telematics in 68 vehicles, 68 vans, to see which could go electric based on range and what their job function was. We took an electric vehicle down there, and they went away with a real buzz that actually, you know, we really do like this. And we ended up putting 48 electric vans in straight away en masse rather than one trial van, because we de-risked it and proved that an electric vehicle would work, looking at temporary telematics devices we put into the vehicles, and drivers absolutely love them. And then you had the people who are still in diesels asking, they were all chomping at the bit to have electric too.
And I guess while we're talking about that, data is crucial in helping fleet managers transition, right? If you think of the amount of data that we sit on as a leasing company, that the customer sits on themselves in terms of how their vehicles are being driven and where they go at night and all that kind of stuff, whether they know they have that data or not. You talk about temporary telematics devices, they're an option if they don't have permanent ones installed. But there's so much that can be done with that data to help people make decision making, that actually that decision making process maybe isn't as hard as it seems like it could be, because they've got everything at their fingertips to make it. They just might need a little bit of help to get there.
If you can de-risk the operational concern, and you can put a cost business case forwards, and then you can show the environmental impact of the benefit of going over to electric, you can now start the important piece, which is the senior engagement.
For a lot of customers, organisations are so driven now by what their customers expect of them, which is their objectives and goals around sustainability, that actually sometimes they might have to, you know, swallow that little bit of a bitter pill in terms of an increased cost for some area of the business to be able to demonstrate their commitment to sustainability.
I mean, we do that as Lloyds Banking Group. We publish our finance emissions every year. We say kind of how are we tracking on our 50% reduction target by 2030. That holds us accountable. It means that we've said we're going to meet that target. And I think it's the same for our customers. I think electric vehicles are a big piece of that puzzle to reduce your emissions. I feel like that's our role, us as a kind of Lex Autolease, but also us as an industry, to do more to educate people, to kind of make some of those, in some cases, myths, and in some cases just kind of inexperience, I guess, try and like make that go away, because we know some of that stuff's not as much of a problem as parts of the media would make you believe. But it's, if you don't have an EV and you don't know anyone who's got an EV, like how are you expected to know that? You've
hit on what I think is one of the biggest hurdles that we've got at the moment, which is misinformation and myths that are out there. We've got a couple of myth busting guides about this, but in certain areas of the sort of the media and social media, you hear that the batteries don't last long. You have to replace them after 3 years. EVs catch on fire all the time. There aren't any chargers. People who have EVs are selling them and going into, back to petrol and diesel. And this simply isn't happening. And we've got the evidence, to prove this. And so we need to help generate a bit of noise against some of this false information, because it's that confidence thing.
And another myth that we're seeing, I think you'll both have an opinion on this, is around total cost of ownership. We've already talked about some aspect of total cost of ownership. I guess what we haven't really talked about is maintenance and the cost of maintaining an EV versus a petrol or diesel vehicle, which we know is less.
What you'll find is different mileages, different terms. You'll have different bits of critical maintenance that might be needed on a vehicle. So you can't really just look at them over a 2-year period or a 3-year period or 10,000 miles a year or 20,000 miles a year. So we've looked at a collective on that. Effectively, on our budgeting, electric vehicles on the whole were 27 to 37% cheaper on our maintenance budgets, and that includes tyres. So the scare stories about tyres wearing out quickly, they might wear out a little bit quickly, but we're taking into account that.
Yeah.
So the costs are lower. And with some of the manufacturers, we've got maintenance budgets that are 40% lower than their ICE equivalent.
We've talked a lot about myths. There's another big one that I think we haven't touched on at all, which is battery, degradation. There's a lot out there around, you see it in the consumer market, especially people saying, well, I don't want to buy this EV because if I do, in 5 years' time, the battery will be worth nothing and I won't be able to sell it and I won't make any of my money back. And it's obviously quite an expensive car for that to happen to. I think people are used to seeing that kind of thing happen with their smartphones. Let's be honest, you get your phone on a contract for a few years. At the end, you're like, well, this barely stays on anymore, so I need to get another one. And that's just not the case with car batteries. Like, far from it, actually. They're built to last longer than the metal that they're in many cases.
Yeah, and there's the EV Rally was a good example. 9-year-old vehicle, 253,000 miles on the clock. We were getting 240-mile range in normal driving. You had the aircon on. We were driving it normally because you didn't want to get artificial, figures back for it. And we were getting 240-mile range out of that vehicle. That's over 85% of its original state of battery after 9 years and 250,000 miles. It was still charging at 120 kilowatt, which was its rated maximum charging speed. And in fact, I'll use Tesla because they're the only ones that I know who have absolutely published the data, but they've calculated, looking at all the vehicles in service that have got to 200,000 miles, the average degradation of a battery at 200,000 miles is 12%. And there's a really tight standard deviation on that.
And we talk a lot about choosing a vehicle with a range that works for you. And so if you're looking at a vehicle and it's an older, a used electric vehicle, maybe its original range was a lot higher than you actually needed. And as long as you're taking that into account when you're, selecting that vehicle, then it's not a problem.
And the more confidence that second life owners of these vehicles can have, the better, because it will drive up resale prices, which in turn will help us support the residual values again, so that contract hire and leasing becomes cheaper for our corporate customers.
With the used piece, from a fleet perspective, where consultancy have been looking at used vehicles, which I think is really important, is like a lot of new technologies, the technology started off in the high-spec, upmarket vehicles, and all these technologies start there and then flow through and then become mainstream on the everyday family car.
And I think it's not just about the choice for customers. I guess if you think about it, used vehicles from a sustainability perspective is kind of one of the best things you can do. You think about the circular economy, you think about, I guess, in other aspects of our lives, we think about, we reuse, we recycle, but With an electric car, it's almost more important because in the manufacturing process, that's when the emissions are at their highest. It does produce more emissions to manufacture an electric vehicle than a petrol or diesel one. And so you almost need to make it last as long as you possibly can to average those emissions out. And that's what we're trying to do. And I think that's one of the best things you can do with electric vehicles is really try and lengthen that life. We hope you found this episode helpful. Look out for further episodes in the series.